particularly in business, your target audience ultimately wants to make money and wants to make profit and potentially wants to work with you to help them do that. So it's almost like targeting your content around how can we help you in your business? What are the things that we do that can help you?
Hey guys, thanks again for listening to the Wine, Whiskey and Weed Show. This is Sid Patel, CEO of Beverage Trade Network and your host for the Wine, Whiskey and Weed Show. So the whole idea behind this podcast and why we started was to bring you value here, to bring you real tips, actionable insights from the people who have mastered the art of their domain. Also, a quick announcement for London wine competitions, guys. If you're looking to enter your wine, beer, or spirits in the 2020 London competition, this is the time. Submit your products before January 31 and get in front of real trade buyers, get international exposure on your wins, and many more benefits. The whole idea behind London Wine Competition was to be relevant to the trade, relevant to the consumers. You can learn more on their websites. So let's dive right into the podcast with Richard Siddle. Hi, welcome to the Wine, Whiskey and Weed Show. Today my guest is Richard Siddle, award-winning drinks business editor with over 25 years of experience, and we're going to go super tactical on content strategy for your wine, spirits, and beer brand. What content works and what does not. More importantly, how to create contextual content for today's platforms. Richard, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Super, thanks again. So you wear a lot of hats, Richard, and I see your name in a lot of publications as contributing editor. Give us a rundown of what you're up to these days, and what, in a nutshell, like your experience, please.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I suppose I would define myself as a business journalist. So my career has always been around business journalism and providing content for different industries. So in my career, I've worked across grocery retail, convenience. I've worked in the travel sector. I've worked in the computing sector. And the last 10, 12 years or so, I've predominantly worked in wine and spirits. I was editor of Harper's Wine and Spirits, and now I run my own website called The Buyer, which is aimed at the on-trade. But yeah, as you say, I also contribute to other publications, websites as well. So yeah, but my experience really is very much around producing content that's very, very relevant to target industry audiences. So that's where my expertise, I suppose, would come into play.
Yep. Amazing. I've personally taken, a lot of your input in creating our content strategies. And, at the same time, I love the way you are very disciplined, even in the amount of content you produce. It's insane, how you still are able to produce every day that quality. So, just going back to this, when I Google your name, Richard, I love what I saw in the results. Like it says, Richard Siddle can help you. Now that's the sort of thing, we all miss in the race for creating volume. We miss the context, right? So in this case, we're focusing, for the sake of the podcast, we're focusing on the wine, beer and spirits industry. And I just wanted to go real tactical this time. So basically, let's take a scenario where we have a private label wine brand or a spirits brand, right? Like where we don't really have a winery or a brewery, so think about the storytelling approach. Just focusing on the brand, because a lot of importers are listening to this, a lot of distributors are listening. They can just focus on creating their strategy around the brand, which, end of the day, everyone wins if that moves. So, how do you, on a macro, how would you start, creating a plan?
Well, I suppose the key thing is if you're talking about a brand, then you would assume that the brand strategy has already identified who your target audience is and who you see most likely to want to buy that brand. And I guess that's the key thing really when it comes to content, producing any kind of content really, is to sort of take yourself out of it and focus 100% on who you're actually aiming that content to. I think too many times writers and brands and businesses are so wrapped up in their own themselves that they often sort of spend more time talking about themselves and what they're trying to do rather than what they're producing is actually going to have a benefit to their reader, to the user. So I suppose any content that they're producing needs to be 100% focused on what benefit is that going to have to the person who's actually seeing that, and thinking it from their perspective and not from your perspective. And I think that's a really key point to start. And it's one where lots of businesses don't do that, and you see a lot of content which is talking about my family, our business, what we do, and it's all about them. And you, as a reader, feel quite distanced from that, and it often falls flat. So,
okay. So let's take an example, right? So I just wanted to give real ways to sort of think on this. So there's a Napa cab, let's say $20, and then the potential audience here is a 35-year-old working woman. So what kind of content would work? And I understand platform and the medium is important as well. So let's say if it's a B2B content that you're trying to generate, it's a launch content that, okay, this is the launch that we're launching this wine, like Richard's Cabernet is launching this July. So how would you go about that? And then after the launch, what kind of content should back it up with? And then a follow through content, like how does the pipeline look like?
Okay. And if you're talking really more about targeting an actual consumer, then it's very much.
I've just defined your brand. Now, targeting is still the trade. I've just defined you who the end consumer of that brand is.
Okay, fair enough. All right. Okay. Well, I suppose it's about a little bit looking at your own supply chain. So who actually is going to be selling that product, and is it going to be going through a restaurant? Is it going to be going through a website? Is it going to be going through a retailer? And then looking at which pieces of content or which platforms or media do those customers read and take the most interest in. So it's really about siphoning it all down. Again, one of the pitfalls people will fall into is they'll produce some content and then they'll send it out to all media and send it out to all kind of platforms, and it quickly gets lost. But for example, to say that brand is being aimed at, as you say, the female consumer that you mentioned, then you're probably looking more at targeting it straight into retail customers or the distributors who are then going to be focusing that in. So choosing the right business platforms for that specific customer group is where you need to go. So it's really about if you imagine there's 100 different media outlets you could go to, you might find that actually targeting it to just 3 or 4 would be the one that you need to do, and forgetting about the rest of them.
Mm-hmm. So picking up media is also just another topic in itself. So let's assume we are not relying on any other third-party media publications here to write about us. So if we go direct on LinkedIn, Instagram, or Facebook, and today's platforms, how would that title look like? Like let's say it's just a launch. Like this July, we're launching this.
Well, again, it's coming back to what I said earlier about what benefit is this brand gonna give to the end consumer. So, is it a lifestyle brand? Is it a brand that's aimed at making you feel healthier? Is it a brand that fits into your working schedule? Is it the kind of wine that you drink with friends? For a barbecue? Is it the kind of wine that you drink seriously? At a dinner party? It's sort of like picking out what lifestyle trend that brand is about, and then focusing your content and your imagery and your messaging around those things. And you might find that social media, that Instagram might work for a certain kind of brand, whereas you might find that you're better off using Facebook or other platforms, depending on which consumer group it is. So again, it's that distinction and defining the right platform for that particular message. But the real focus again has to be about thinking about core messages and lifestyle triggers that consumer can really buy into, and then focusing on those.
Can you give us an example?
Well, I suppose if you the iHeart brand, which is I think available in about 20, 30 different countries now. So the I Heart Wine, so it's literally kind of taking that famous, I love New York imagery with a heart sign. Now that's been very particularly focused at sort of 20 to 35-year-old women. So they use a lot of advertising in women's press, consumer press, and they do a lot of work around events and festivals, and they do a lot of work around aligning themselves with shows like Love Island and those kind of things. Now that's to the end point, but the point is the supermarkets they're working with can then also buy into that, and they can also see that work has been done to the consumer. But so when they're working with them with the retailer, they can also take some of those messages and some of that branding into the actual supermarket itself as well. So you get that kind of double hit, but on shelf and also on the platforms that they're working on. So I Heart would be a very good example of how that works in Barefoot as well. Barefoot is a great brand in terms of how it's taking its whole kind of social responsibility, the whole kind of beach lifestyle aspect things, and they've used that imagery very well to take wine, not just about wine, it's about wine being part of our lives and what impact it can have. And again, they've used that right through their whole content strategy. So be it on shelf, be it on their own branding they do, but also with the sort of the associations they have and the people who they work with. So it's that kind of omni-channel approach, I suppose, that you would look at.
Mm-hmm. Fantastic. And some of the tips that you think works and that you've seen not work, like some trigger points, some kind of examples of tips for titles.
Brands that haven't worked. And I know there's the classic example, I suppose. Yellowtail got quite a bit of backlash, I think, recently when they did their recent Super Bowl advertising, which I think fell flat because it was sort of not really clear the messaging that they had and the target audience that they're going for. Was it really the kind of American football audience that buys into Yellowtail? And I think they spent a lot of money on a campaign which quite widely seen as not working, because they were thinking more about a mass audience rather than thinking who actually is watching this and are they going to be interested in your brand. Just don't think because something has a large audience it's necessarily going to be relevant to what you're doing.
True, absolutely. Maybe a music concert would have been better, but yeah, I get your point.
Yeah, exactly.
For the images, right? Like when I see your websites and when I see your stories, one of the things that do pop out are images. How do you go about sourcing or having an image strategy behind it? Like, what's your way of working around images?
Yeah, well, I think that comes back down to the personality of your brand. Actually taking this into sort of wider context. If you're producing any kind of content for a winery, for a wine distributor, a wine company, or retailer, it really comes down to what is it that you want to say about yourself. And we all walk into these companies and you see the brand values on the wall, and people would have spent time working up what these brand values are for that relevant business. But you need to, when it comes to content, you need to take those values and turn it into a personality. So your business becomes a living, breathing thing, as it were. And
meaning the reader should connect that this is me here.
Yeah. So the ones that do it really well, like brands like a lot of the clothing companies, Gap and
even like
Nike,
Johnny Walker and
Nike,
things of that nature.
Yeah, they have a personality. You know what that personality is just by seeing their imagery.
Like Jim Beam, for example, is a good example.
Yeah,
or Jack Daniels, actually. Yeah.
Brands like Guinness, and so if you look at their advertising over a good 20 or 30 years, they're using a similar kind of personality in all the imagery they're using. So they may be very different in terms of the execution, but what the overall feel, the personality comes through. So that
it does take time, I think, to create a brand, right? Because you have to again and again put the same message. As you said, it took 20 years for some brands. But for the new brand, Richard, where they don't have the budget, we're talking small and medium, there has to be little breakout sort of stories or content, little more creativeness in that, like something which just like wows, the reader.
Yeah, but
How can
I
you put
think
that sizzle?
if you look at someone like Orange Swift,
Yeah, that's
the
amazing.
kind of the Napa Californian wine. Now he in a very short period of time, I mean, we're looking like less than 5 years, has created a brand that just by the iconic labels that he uses has kind of created a whole personality around an actual the label is almost becomes the wine. I mean, more so than the actual blend of the wine itself. So I think that's a really good example of how somebody's really thought about what the personality imagery can do, and they've almost taken it to the point where that then becomes the real life and soul. But I mean, obviously, you can't. Not every company can do that because that's a unique opportunity. If you're looking in the general circumstances, I think it's just if you're producing content on a daily basis for a wine distributor or for a retailer, it can be very hard to think of new ways of talking about yourself and what else can I say. But if you have these brand personalities and these brand, when I talk about brand, I mean you as a business having a brand, and if you really focus in on who your audience is, what you want to say to them, what is it that your audience is interested in, take the time to really understand what it is your target audience wants to know, and then focus your content around that rather than just thinking, what are we doing today? Like, oh, we're having a day raising money for a particular charity or whatever it might be. That might be great for you and that might be great for the charity, but it doesn't necessarily that interesting to your target audience. And particularly in business, your target audience ultimately wants to make money and wants to make profit and potentially wants to work with you to help them do that. So it's almost like targeting your content around how can we help you in your business? What are the things that we do that can help you? And always go back to that. So if you're sort of brainstorming ideas for a company, don't necessarily think about what's happening on the different floors in your company. It's more about what's actually happening with your customers. Are they having to try and find more wines to sell by the glass? Are they having to try and find better packaging solutions, cheaper ways of selling wines? Are they, what are the things that their challenges are, and then look at what you're doing to help them, and then I think that can really help build a real good content plan and allow you to sort of keep on coming up with new ideas and fresh ideas that, and you're not always having to sort of almost like go to your own well for content. Your customers are the key for that.
So I mean, like, let's say you got a glass pour in some restaurant. You're saying, try to connect the dots by like saying, this wines are now into. I mean, I'm just going to go very simple title here. I know that it's very raw, but like something like this wines are now available by the glass at this restaurant. So join us at happy hours or something like that. Now that has to be translated in a very storytelling approach.
It does, yeah. And again, I guess if you're a restaurant, you need to then think about who your customers are. So a restaurant saying, if you're having a happy hour, say, and saying, wine's half price between 6 and 7 or whatever, is that the right time for your customers? You might find that if you're working in a financial district that you need to either do it earlier or later. You might find that actually 7 till 8 is when people are coming out of work. So you doing a happy hour between 6 and 7 is a little bit of a waste of time. So it's almost, do you know what I mean? It's not just following a set rules. It's always going back. I know I'm repeating myself, but it's almost like if you're a restaurant, or it's who are your audience, who are your customers, who do you want to get through the door? And it might be, for example, a lot of restaurants and bars now, they might on the day want to attract people who are working from home, or people who are looking after children who, they might have special deals at lunchtimes, or they might have special things to attract people to come come join the restaurant, join the bar, join the day, and but that's a completely different messaging to what you might then have in the evening for people who you want to then come and have a full course meal in the evening. So it's almost like thinking about your content during the day and how can you attract people to come, in for breakfast, or perhaps have a night where you have BYO and you allow people to come and bring their own wines, but which day of the week is going to work best for your customers, not what week is best for you, what's. So again, it's that kind of communication with who you are, and the best content always comes out of being really close to the needs of who you are, of your customers. So again, it's that taking the time, doing your research, really understanding the market you're in, and then working back from there. Those are really important messages to get across.
What are some of the elements? Let's say it's always a challenge, for us to personally come out with like 1,200 word article. I mean, what are the challenge? What are some of the things that you can sort of, think where it can help you fill that article? Which are like some usuals which you think you should always include because that's a good practice?
Yeah, again, I think it's the tone of voice that you have. Again, it comes back a little bit to your personality. So to think about what your tone of voice should be, and then are you using the word you, or are you using the word us, as it were? And if you're writing an article, sometimes people will often always refer to themselves, whereas again, it's going to be much more readable if you turn that around and make it like rather than saying the five key challenges facing our business this year, turn that around into the five key challenges facing you this year, and then it suddenly just makes you, the reader, want to read it a lot more. Other ideas in terms of building good content is to think of case studies and to include your own customers actually in the content that you're doing, so that and I mean, at the end of the day, you should hopefully have countless customers that you can rely on. So talk about the work that you're doing with them, what success stories you've had, include quotes from them, and also there's a great opportunity there for you to actually invite your customers to share their opinions. So why not ask one of your customers to answer some questions about their business, how they work, what are their challenges, what are they doing, what innovations they're introducing, because not only does it allow you to find out more about them, but it gives them a platform, makes them feel wanted and needed, and it also makes great reading for everybody in your sector, because people always want to know what other people are doing, and I suppose the other thing is another good exercise to do is actually to look back over your last week and analyze what you've read. What article did you click on when you opened up a newsletter, or what article did you click on when you were looking at social media? What was it about that made you want to click on that article? And just write down, because it was tips on how to lose weight, or it could be tips on how to cut down your drinking in January, whatever it might be.
Wow, no, perfect. I mean, you're right, because, the way we are consuming, we are not writing that way. And what you're saying is absolutely correct. Like, what triggers you, what triggered us. I mean, what is making us click? We should at least, practice that more.
Yeah. And also don't think about our personal life and our business life as two separate things. What makes you want to,
curious in the business, basically.
Yeah. What makes you want to watch a certain video on social media over another one?
Very good point. Yep.
And again, a lot of it is down to what's going to entertain you, what's going to interest you, what's going to make you smile, what's going to make you learn, find out, discover. Those are all the things that when we're at work, we want to discover, we want to learn, we want to do better for ourselves, but we also want to be entertained. We also want to have a bit of fun and smile as well. So think about those things, write them down, and then try and use those in your own content and try and well, not copy, but at least use those to influence what you're then doing. That then you'll find opens up a whole new way of thinking for yourself. So you're not, I think a lot of people who do content always say, "Oh, I don't do social media because I just don't know what to say," or I really don't know what to write. And the danger is they then don't do anything. Just try and have different approaches to it and think about it in a different way, so it becomes less of a hurdle and actually becomes sort of opens up the world a lot more to you, into what content can do. And I think the key thing really is that creating content as a business is no longer just a nice to have. It's a complete necessity. You have to do it because all your competitors are. And I'm always amazed by the amount of business leaders you talk to, and they say, "Oh, I don't do social media. I'm not on social media. I just don't do that." And you look at them and you think, well, all due respect, I really don't think in 5-10 years time you're going to be sitting in your position, because everybody else around you is, and the people underneath you are, and that's where the conversation, that's where the learning, that's what people are doing. And if you're not prepared to take part in that, then you really are at risk of becoming a little bit obsolete, really. So content isn't just for your content manager or for your social media manager. Everybody in a business, even the emails you write to each other. If you think about it, when you're writing an email to your boss or or if you're a boss sending it to your team, you have to write that content in a way that people are going to attract their attention. How do you make it interesting? How do you make it want to be read? So all these content skills are something which we do all day long. We're writing content.
Yeah, we say content, but it's actually communication, which is always going to be there. It's important.
Yeah, exactly. No, exactly. Yeah, and I think these days, we use the phone so much less to actually speak on. We spend all our time writing emails to each other, and we're seeing print all the time. And the challenge is, how do you make your print stand out from the rest? And it's fascinating. I think the more people look at it, the more people start to understand the benefits and how much really difference it can make. And then those companies that get it really do stand out and make a difference. And those who say things like, "Oh, we don't like to shout about ourselves, we don't like to talk about ourselves," well, you might find that nobody wants to do any business with you either. So the world's changing a lot, and people have to recognize that content and communications is actually fundamental to all this.
Absolutely spot on, Richard. So I think you have given us a lot here. I think it's great pointers in there where we're going to dissect and take it from there. I mean, it's just going to be a lot of pointers, and the key here was actually how do you go about thinking of producing content, which you have given some great pointers on. So thanks again for that.